Alright, what's going on, guys? It's Professor Kirk back here with another video. Today we're going over neural control, exercising muscle. And to keep in mind, these videos are just brief synopsises over the main concepts and ideas and things that you'll learn in the course and such. But if you have any questions about the details or any specific concepts, feel free to reach out to your professor or to your graduate student. Alright, so let's get into it. So first we're going to break down the nervous system. So the main thing you need to know about the nervous system is that there are really only two parts of the nervous system. You have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and that's it. So the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Now everything else that lies outside of the brain and the spinal cord is considered the peripheral nervous system, right? So imagine like if I have my hand right here, right? I got my hands, got my arms and such. My nerves are running all through here. This is all considered my peripheral nervous system. Now we break that down into two other subcategories. We also have the sensory and the motor. So the sensory motor are the main two neurons that you're going to want to think about. So the sensory neurons are kind of things that detect things from the environment, right? If I'm walking outside and it's cold, my sensory neurons are going to pick that up. Now if I reach for a hot stove, right, my sensory neurons are going to tell me what's hot. And it's going to send a signal back to my central nervous system. My central nervous system is going to be like, hey, that bad boy is hot, move your hand. And it's going to move my hand through these things called motor neurons. We learned about that in chapter 1, like the alpha motor neurons and such. Those are the things that are going to be, all right, let me move my hand back, you know what I'm saying? And then we broke down the motor neuron down to its two components. We have the autonomic and the somatic portions of the nervous system. So the autonomic are just like basically involuntary control of things that you're not conscious about, such as breathing, heart rate, peristalsis, stuff such as that, right? But then we move into the somatic nervous system. This is portions of the nervous system that you can control, such as walking, getting up, jumping, all those things that are under your voluntary control. Those are the main two things that you want to know the difference between. Autonomic is involuntary and somatic is voluntary. Now moving down a little bit even further into the autonomic nervous system, we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, all right? So with the sympathetic, this is going to be something that I'm sure you learned in your high school class called fight or flight, right? So if someone's trying to like get at me or something like that, or they're trying to kill me or whatever, then that adrenaline's going to kick in, my heart rate's going to increase and stuff like that, right? However, in the parasympathetic system, this is rest or digest. Like we just ate a meal, we're tired, we're going to lay down and let our body do what it needs to do, etc., right? So transitioning from the breakdown, let's see what an actual neuron really looks like in our body, right? So here we got the nucleus. So let me move this up just a little bit. Alright, I'll hold it like that. Alright, great. So here we have the whole neuron, right? So here we have the nucleus, that's the center of the neuron. And then moving on from the neuron, when electrical signal is sent, it is received by the dendrites, right? So it's first received by the dendrites, then it travels through the body, which is this. We call this the soma. All this white right here is the soma. And then it moves down this place called the axon. So the axon is this place that's between these big brown squares right here. Now, what you see in these big brown squares, these are actually the myelin sheath of the cell, right? And what they do is they just help with the propagation speed of an electrical signal. If we didn't have myelin sheaths, it would take forever for signals to travel through our body. And then once it travels down to the axon, we get to the terminal endings, and then that signal is then passed on to another neuron that will pick up that impulse, right? So that's all you really need to know about the neuron. Now, moving on to the second portion of today's lesson, right? So here we want to learn about the sodium-potassium pump and how it's used in our bodies in real time, in real time. So one of the main things that you're going to need to know for the course, we're not going to get into too deep with the details, but you'll need to know that within the cell, whenever we're trying to, I guess, complete or fulfill an action potential, is that there's a constant balance and imbalance between these two ions called sodium and potassium. So within the cell, whenever we want to start an impulse or conduct an action potential, we have a lot of sodium outside the cell and a little bit of sodium inside the cell. However, on the flip side, we have a lot of potassium inside the cell and only a little potassium outside the cell, right? So what's going to happen is that, looking down on this chart down here, in order to get to this thing called a action potential, we actually have to go through a series of charges to get there. So what's going to happen is one of these gates, like this gate right here, is going to open, right? And then sodium is going to rush into the cell. That's what we have right here on this chart. And at that the resting memory potential is at -70. But sodium's positive. So as it rushes in, it increases it from a negative value to a more positive value. We call this depolarization. Now, as it rushes in, it reaches a certain threshold at positive 30, I think it's millivolts. Now, positive 30 millivolts, the sodium channels begin to close. And what happens is potassium begins to rush out of the cell, right? So it's coming out, and it's coming out fast, right? And it comes out so fast that it overshoots the resting membrane potential, which is negative 70 millivolts. And it usually goes down to, like, I guess, negative 90 or something like that, right? And then once it gets down to negative 90, what happens is those potassium channels, they kind of begin to close and such. And as a result, sorry about that. And as a result, what was I saying? Oh, and as a result, we'll then return back to this negative 70. You'll see how it starts to kind of like level off here and such. Now, there are two things that you really want to know aside from, I guess, concerning this graph in particular. We have two periods which an action potential cannot be conducted, and one where it can be conducted, but it's kind of hard. So the first one is the absolute refractory period. So whenever we are starting an initial action potential, that means whenever sodium is rushing to the cell, we cannot conduct another action potential. We already have one going, so trying to do another one is not going to work, right? Then we have the relative refractory period. This is when potassium has kind of like hyperpolarized the cell, right? And it's at this negative 90. We can start another one, but the stimulus is going to have to be pretty freaking strong in order to make that happen, right? So that's the main two things you want to know. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I hope this video was helpful.